So let's go ahead and get back into it. Welcome back to Great Scott Marcus. The topic of the week is the Microsoft Surface Studio, which they might as well have just called the real Surface because it's actually on a Surface. And then the Apple event, which really was much about the video playing in the background, Mark, the new MacBook Pro.
Yes.
And so we're going to start off, well, for those who don't know, the topic is basically the main topic of the week, the thing we're going to talk about a lot. And I also want to mention about the source section up here at the top. I have been trying to annotate that.
Bam.
But for YouTube recently changed how they annotate, and of course, not everything works. So I'm not able to actually annotate sources outside of YouTube, so I will be able to annotate these videos, but like last week's episode had no annotations because the sources were outside YouTube, except for the hype train, which I still didn't annotate because I was annoyed. Anyway, so Mark, I'm going to let you kick this off since you're really, the Apple guy out of the two of us.
It was about time that they refined the MacBook Pro. It's been a couple of years since they actually, really took it underneath the design knife and did some refining to it. The cornerstone is that a good word?
Depends. What are you going to say next? I'm not
this
in your
event
head.
The cornerstone of this event was
okay, that's a good
what
word.
They're showing here. This touch bar, which yes, it's good. I think it's cool. It's nice and intuitive. It actually supports third-party apps.
Can I just 100% say that this is iteration? There is no evolution.
Exactly,
here.
it is.
And I'm going to say the same thing about the studio, and we'll get to that when we talk about the studio. But like this is again, we come back to like Sony and Apple's conference that we talked about recently. This doesn't seem like it needed an event.
Right. It really didn't, and it is an iteration. It's something that's new though. Here's where I'm kind of
touch isn't new. Yeah,
exactly.
Like,
touch isn't new. Touch isn't new.
It's like a really thin phone on your computer.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's new about it though is the way how it's integrated in the operating system with different applications. For example, if you open up Safari, there's a search bar. If you open up Messages, your emojis pop up. If you open up Final Cut, you can actually like scrub through your videos. Like it's kind of nice to be able to see something and then do something at the same time.
Which is fine, but again, something we're going to talk about with the Surface is like, but it could also be done with this and this. Oh!
Yeah, I mean,
like so here's
the idea is it helps simplify so you're not using dedicated function buttons for one application that is useless in another application.
But these functions aren't dedicated. The mouse isn't dedicated to certain things. In fact, the mouse is as much touch as touches, because you could easily have these bars popping up through software. So
I mean,
go ahead.
I feel like it's a sort of step towards efficiency. From what I've seen on the Apple event, they had, like I said, they were using Final Cut and Photoshop with it, and it was interesting.
See, that's where I'm not. I can't agree as somebody who is constantly in shop, and here's why: because your key bindings, where your shortcuts are, and like disconnecting so. Whether or not the keyboard and mouse were the ideal way to interface with a computer, or are the ideal way to interface with a computer, is really hard to say, because the thing is, we teach ourselves how to use them, and then we become incredibly efficient in using them, and then you add another tool in there, you don't have a third hand, so you disconnect from the two devices, and then you're kind of learning to use this new device, and I just can't help but think, like, you could have a software that looks like this bar on the screen that you simply slide your mouse over, that's like at the bottom of the screen, and you just mouse over and you click on it, or you press a button to interact with it. And
so here's like where I've talked to a number of creatives that use photographers, use like Photoshop on creatives.
I hate it.
People in a creative profession, use Photoshop often.
I know. Design professionals is a good way
exactly. A friend of mine who's a photographer, and she's always in and out of Photoshop, and we were talking between mouse versus trackpad and how to use it, and I was like, wow, I can't believe you use it so much. She's like, really? I find it so much easier. Like I get so much more control than I do over a mouse when I'm trying to edit certain things. And I think that's kind of where they're trying to get at. This is trying to give you a bit more control over certain functions. I have not played with it, so I don't really know how personally it's gonna affect me. I guess here's my overall thing about the Apple event. I don't have a problem with this per se.
I don't have a problem with it, but
it is an iteration.
Yeah, exactly. I think that won't innovate anything, and it won't be. It's not going to be one of these things where it's just like, oh, we need this on everything. It's just kind of there. It's a neat gimmick. I think basically the onus is obviously going to be on Apple to prove if this is more than a gimmick. And it very well might be more than that. I think the placement is bad. Personally, again, this is my, if I wanted to interact with this, even on a laptop, I would actually prefer it closer to the trackpad, or to the left or the right of the trackpad, because
that actually makes sense. Like kind of like right between the trackpad and the actual keyboard would make.
Because when you move to the top of the keyboard, even for your F1s or things like that, you're kind of having to lean over instead. I don't want to have to lean over. I just want to kind of look down and fiddle. It's high. It's high up.
Yeah. They also made the trackpad quite a bit larger too, so I think that might help a little bit. Like that trackpad's about half the size of that fucking.
I think a square would have been better, but of course I'm sure they also product tested this, because you could potentially hit that with your palm if it was lower. Either way, I don't think that is the best placement.
Well, it's it is what it just. I mean, it's just a mixed bag of reviews or thoughts on it.
It's tough because it's not in our hands.
Yeah,
I would almost prefer if it was on the screen, like if it was just at the bottom or even the top of the screen, where it was just a separate screen on the actual screen itself. And again, this is because it's on the keyboard when your eyes are already up here, which means you have to then disconnect from the screen to do something that actually works with the monitor in front of you.
I think Apple's always been kind of against the idea of touching the screen, though. I don't think they'll ever make a touch screen. That's technically what an iPad is, right? I meant like for like a desktop or laptop computer.
I get that, but
yeah, they're kind of against that because like what you were talking about earlier, like that disconnect, like from the keyboard and mouse or trackpad to the screen and back and forth. And plus, I mean, you don't want to smudge your fucking screen.
I mean, that's what you do with an iPad. So
yeah, iPad is I guess a device as opposed to a computer, in my humble opinion.
I think so since you brought that point up, I think there's a bit too much dissonance there. All of these devices, even your fucking phone, are computers, and I hear this at the holidays, like my nephew talking to my sister's boyfriend at the time, and like. They're just like, but it's not a laptop, it's a tablet. And it's just like, guys, no matter what way you cut it, it's a computer.
Apple's disregarding their iPad Pro, which I think is garbage, because it's still an iPad. There are things that I can do with my MacBook Pro that I cannot do with my iPad or my iPhone, nor would I want to do on my iPad or my iPhone.
But 100% that separates computers too. There are tons of things I can do with my desktop because it's so powerful that I can't do with my laptop, like Photoshop or processing video.
But I think that's where like Apple products they keep that sort of separation, and they try to kind of merge together with the iPad Pro, which is dumb because it runs iOS, but iOS in itself is not as powerful as OS X.
I think there is a favor that Apple does there for the customer. I think what they do is they make it a bit more obvious, like this can do this, this can't do this. Whereas there's a bit more onus, and I love this word lately, onus. There's a bit more onus, which means responsibility on a particular party. There's a bit more onus on the customer to understand what your Windows shit, or even Linux shit, if you really want to go there, can do or can't do. And it's good on Apple to make that a bit more obvious to their users. That does help sales. But at the same time, like, the one thing that separates an iPad from working with Photoshop is simply processing power and RAM.
Right. And, you know, I think Microsoft's done a good job overall with, you know, actually having everything kind of blend together, whereas Apple's been like,
but obviously that makes things more confusing.
But I do want to come back to like what you just said about Apple and the customer, and this is like my main gripe with the MacBook Pro. And I keep seeing this fucking video, and it's like there's more to it than just the touch bar. So
I did not watch the event. I only grabbed this because it seemed like the most prominent thing.
It kind of is. And as a secondary, they basically stripped it of all the ports except for 4 USB-Cs, which is bullshit.
That bothers me about Mac too, continually stripping ports. Like
it does. I mean, I get if USB-C is the future and it's going to be the next. Is that mainstream thing?
So tell me about USB-C, because I know about USB 3.0, but I am only just starting to hear about USB-C.
USB-C is multi-purpose I/O.
I'm getting it. It's the smaller version, like USB-B was, but it's.
I don't remember USB-B. I mean, it looks like the opposing end of like the lightning bolt. It's reversible, so basically, if you look it up, you can plug it in either way. You can use it as a power source. You can use it to connect a.
It's the smaller variation of a USB plug, but okay. It's the next iteration of.
I mean, it's entirely.
It's universal. The next iteration of this. So it's not this. This is B. Yep.
It's entirely universal, which is nice. You know, I think USB-C is a great thing to have. You know, it can be universal and used for literally anything. Whether you want to connect it to power, like I said, external power source, or display, drives, whatever. But you should not have, like, there are important ports that are widely used right now. SD card is a universal.
I'm gonna go ahead and pause this video so it doesn't become too distracting. So
I'll
find a good pause spot, but continue.
SD cards are widely used among photographers. Like it's the same card that's going to go into your Sony, your Nikon, your Canon, and now you need a goddamn adapter to plug into your MacBook Pro. And on top of that, your phones, they're still shipping phones with USB, like standard USB. iPhone 6. I cannot connect my iPhone to a new MacBook Pro without an adapter. I have a.
There's no USB-C to C.
Right. And it's just I think that's a bullshit move, and they spent a long time putting a lot of time and kind of pushing Thunderbolt, and then Thunderbolt 2.0, Thunderbolt 3.0, and there's no Thunderbolt port on this thing. Like they put a lot of effort into these Thunderbolt ports, and there aren't any. It's like, so now I feel like with a laptop, you should be able to take it somewhere and have everything you need in the laptop.
I have to interject here.
Bus of dongles
Let me interject.
Sure.
So that's one thing I am actually super happy about when I look at basically Android devices. Most of them at this point are USB-B. Where like you have plenty of USB-B cords in your home, and most of these phones are just going that direction, so they will work with your shit. I think a lot of people are entirely sick of like all these different types of chargers, and this one's for my phone and this one's for my camera. It's just like no. And I think that there is some disconnect between Apple and the customer here, where it's just like, you guys should I'm in line with what you're saying, basically. Like, guys, like, you become more uniform.
And this is not what the customer wanted either, which is like a big problem for me. And I'm sure other people. And there's a silly example, but so this computer is no longer. It will not have 32 gigabytes of RAM. It's not capable of doing it. They're not offering that, at least not right now.
But the old versions had 32.
You could get it that way.
It has how many? 64?
16.
Why would you go backwards?
I don't know. No, here's why. Because to save battery, like to improve battery life, you cannot upgrade to 32 gigs of RAM.
No,
and and the video cards are.
People want to process more these days, not less. Whether it's with the fucking internet, which actually does require more RAM these days, more processing power, more graphics power. Like you can't take a backward step like that.
So it overall on this
not without options. That's important.
I'd say overall on this Apple event, like it's cool on the surface, but once you kind of dig down deep and like realize there's no all the ports are gone, like. The lack of performance it's not for the high end producers of content anymore. Do
you think this is going to be like the worst selling MacBook Pro thus far?
I'm not gonna say it's the worst selling. Some people are going to buy them, but it's just not. It's not innovating anymore, man.
I mean, dude, that's what we talk about all the time, and we'll talk about that even more with the studio. But I like when I hear that you're cutting internals, you're cutting some internals in half. Like, to me, that signals that like sales will go down comparatively, even accounting for inflation or increasing customer base.
Right.
I think
I'm on Apple's website right now, like buying a 15-inch, and there's no option to upgrade your processor, your RAM. It is what it is.
Tell me, as someone who is not a MacBook user, how easy are they to open up and upgrade that RAM? Is that possible?
I don't know on these. I have not done it. I heard it's not.
Yeah, obviously.
I know the first iteration of like the Pro that I have, it was actually soldered to the logic board, so it was not upgradable. I think that might still be the thing where you cannot upgrade the RAM in these things.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and like I've got 16 gigs in this one right now, but in a couple years, I definitely want 32.
64, like
yeah.
I have let's see, I have 100 some in my computer.
Jesus Christ, that's a lot of RAM.
Well, again, it's for processing video.
Okay, wait a minute, hold on.
Which is very important, and that's also important to Mac users. I've met plenty of Mac users who want to process video with their devices, and your RAM is super important, especially even the type of RAM that you'll have in these devices.
So I need to correct myself. You do have options to upgrade processor, capacity, graphics, but not the RAM.
The RAM is still super important. Like,
yes.
I did a ton of reading when I got this PC about processing video and streaming, and I got the right RAM, and that's important. And being able to even install the right RAM yourself for processing video, like there's specific RAM, like all RAM can do it, but there is specific RAM for making it go better. Period. The end. Like that's sore to hear. Even as somebody who doesn't really care, like.
I would just say, like, overall on this MacBook event, it's cool on the surface, and we're like, hey, that's nice. But then once you start digging down deep and you realize what exactly they took away, you're like, the fuck, Apple.
Speaking of the Surface, but no. To conclude on that, like,
I don't think Apple's in the powerhouse that they're.
I mean. For somebody to be knocked off, the top of their game, it requires something more than just iteration.
Yeah.
And what I do want to conclude on with that Apple event or the MacBook Pro is what did you actually think of the trailer? Because what I'm hearing people saying about this trailer that is playing for us right now is that, one, it's very Apple-esque. Two, it's really fucking good and it gives people chills. And
Microsoft did what Apple couldn't do.
They did what Apple did, literally.
It's their better version of Apple's.
Yeah, like this is literally an Apple commercial, which was why I actually thought I was just like, oh yeah, the new Mac Pro, and you were just like, no, that's the Surface, and I was like, what?
Well, I think it's because the Apple trailer was all about the Touch Bar, which as we just discussed over the past fucking 20-some minutes, like, it's cool but not that special.
I mean, I think the trailer got the message across, and it was a good message, but that's really all it should have been. There probably didn't need to be this whole event for even the internals, or just talking about the book, or talking about things happening around the MacBook Pro. It probably could have just been like, here's some announcements, or here's an overview from this investors meeting. Like, I like, this is a proper trailer, and that's all Microsoft really did. They didn't have to do like this whole event for it, and yet this probably could have had its own event, because
I think it had some sort of event, but
they did.
I don't remember. I think so.
Maybe
not.
Well, let me do a quick Google. There might be a bit of a breakup.
But I mean,
I mean, I'm not going to compare them, because that'd be like comparing, like a commercial for oranges and a commercial for dog food. Like, they're two different things.
Yeah, but I will say that, like, based off these trailers, this is 10 times more intriguing. Because I think it shows. I don't know.
I think there's a lot of flair here, and I think there's a lot of as far as the trailer goes, there's a lot of, well, this isn't really how artists work their art through computers. Many artists are used to the devices that they use. Yes, you might get some artists working with it in this way. It could be, one of the first devices to actually get us working with our hands on a computer like this, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
I think it's a step in a good direction, though. I'll give it that.
It's a 5K screen, supposedly.
Yeah.
Again, like, this, I thought it was fucking Apple, because one, it looks very Apple, and two, like, even people talking about the screen, like, that's a very Apple thing, to have these Retina displays, these super high def, super high pixel displays, and so this is Microsoft, and now I see that is actually Windows on the bottom. This is Microsoft playing Apple's game and beating them at it.
Well, what's interesting too about when you say that is that Microsoft is making this hardware, and just like Google made their own Pixel, made their own phone. Like, I mean, Apple's been doing that for years, but like, it's good to see these tech companies going, okay, this is what we want in our computer. This is what we want our software to run.
Oh, I'm sure this has been R&D'd for like years, maybe half a decade.
So it's like, I'm happy to see Microsoft doing this, and I think it's actually going to be a viable competition to the iMac.
We'll see. I do think a big obstacle will still be they've stopped this whole push for Windows 10, which is very helpful, because it is a worthwhile operating system, but the way in which they were so aggressive with it was not helpful. I think that so here's the part before we really continue to talk about the trailer, talk about the potential of this machine. The part that I want to talk about is more fucking iteration.
Yeah, I mean, basically, as I'm watching this, like, none of this is new. It's just they put it all in one really pretty package.
Well, the thing that's kind of new, but that people might misconstrue as being evolution, but is iteration, is this kind of nubbin device.
Yeah, well, you can buy devices like that. Like a lot of 3D designers, it's called the 3D Connection. It's a little Space Navigator thing. So like things like that do exist, but I guess the thing
do you put it on the screen?
That is what's new. No, you do not. But it rotates and all that shit.
Here's my problem with that. Again, this is something that could easily be right-clicked and access rotator, and then you have just this circle that pops up around your mouse, and then you click on something. Or you could have, again, these things built in through, like, so right click is a very Microsoft thing, not a very Apple thing. Again, it could just be a part of the right click bar. It could be a part of the files menu like it is on Apple, where you have the same menus across most of your things on Apple, most of your software on Apple. For me, that's just an external periphery that could easily be done through software. However, the one thing that, again, coming back to onus, Microsoft will have to show us why we need that as a device itself, is it easier to operate without taking processing power from the computer? And when I think about that, basically you have this ring that you might drag across the screen. It's probably easier to do as an external device, but that's only for now. Because either way, eventually, like these external devices, well, it's just like, oh, well, we found out how to make the software processing a lot easier on machines, and now it's just software instead of hardware, and it's just like, oh.
Yeah. It's... back to Apple.
Shit. I didn't mean for that to happen.
Oh, well.
But let me hold on, I can fix this. So
I feel like Microsoft, they didn't strip any ports. Okay, I'll be honest, I don't know what ports are on it, but I've got a good feeling that they didn't just take everything off of it and include 4 USB-C ports. Obviously, it's again kind of aimed towards creative professionals. With that, how do we want to call it, that thing.
I'm gonna call it a spinner, I guess.
Yeah, and I think you're right though too. Like, it doesn't need to be displayed on the screen or placed on the screen. Absolutely not. I feel like if you want to sell it with a machine, you can have it sitting next to you. Put a button on top
when I see that, I think the interface
shows on the screen.
I think of I didn't dust my desk this week, and like I set the thing down on some dust, and now I'm putting dust on the screen. Yeah. Again, just very, very cool, these concepts of like this device interfaces with the screen differently. However, it could be a button on a very specific mouse where it's just, or so what. Another thing
the rotating thing is kind of nice. So I think put a button on that and then put the interface showing up on your display, and then you can still rotate and click with that device.
Two hands. However, again, keyboard can do that. Yeah. You can easily say, okay, we're going to have the rotator up here, and now I'm moving the mouse over here, and I'm using my left hand on the keyboard to access what I want out of the rotator. The rotator is literally a menu.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's basically the same thing that is the touch display on the MacBook Pro. That is a menu. It's basically different menus accessed in different ways. And again, I'm not saying that they should immediately be written off, but the onus is again on
Microsoft.
Mac, on Microsoft, Mac. Both of them, to show us why. It's kind of like, do you remember around 2011, 2012 when they had these little devices that would plug in through USB on your computer, and then it would allow you to use your hands to manipulate everybody was just like, oh, it's going to change everything. And it changed absolutely nothing. Because this actually provides us with more fucking options than than just 5 or 10 digits.
Right.
And that's important. And when I see both of these, I do look back on those devices that are just like, oh, it could change everything, and it's just like, no, this seems like iteration.
So, this is a small point about the Microsoft Surface Studio. I think
God damn it! Why does this keep happening?
You ever sit too close to a 27-inch computer display? It's not fun. It hurts your eyes. And I feel like with that Surface Studio, it's almost made to be right in front of you, which I Again, I'm just being nitpicky on this though.
So this is something I've run into with my desktop compared to my laptop. The ability to adjust brightness will be important for that computer. Being able to adjust your brightness on a desktop.
And warmth.
Yeah, going forward will be important because we're starting to do that. We do that with our phones. We do that with our laptops. I want to be able to do that with my desktop. There's probably an external periphery that I could download that could adjust the brightness for all three of my screens, but it's been too stuck in monitors for a long time. And yeah, that should have brightness control.
I'm going to assume
in
it
and
does.
of itself.
I mean, Apple's had a brightness for their keyboard and for the display on the keyboards for years, and obviously now it's integrated in the touch bar. So I'm going to assume Microsoft is going to have a similar function.
It should be part of the OS, is basically what I'm saying. Not just a part of the devices, whether it's an external keyboard or an external monitor. Brightness should be built into the OS.
Now, do you have any final thoughts on this? Because I'm also curious about your opinion on another product we're not featuring here right now. It's the Lenovo Yoga Book.
I haven't heard of this.
You should pull it up real quick. I think it's an interesting little device. I mean, it's a laptop/tablet. I'm not sure exactly what they want to go with it, but it's actually, you can get it with either Android or Windows 10 on it. But what's interesting about it is that, you can have it as a laptop. The entire keyboard surface is just touch. Okay. And if you want to use it as a tablet, you can fold it over and you have the screen to use as tablet function. What's cool about that surface with the keyboard being only touch is that you can actually use it as like a Wacom tablet and draw and write on it, and it shows up on display, which I think is kind of cool. I think it's actually it's an iteration, but I think it's more more innovative in the iteration sense than both of these products together, because it's just like it completely ditches the mechanical keyboard, which I think with Apple's now touch bar might happen eventually, where the keyboards are not
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
Microsoft tried that non-mechanical touch-only keyboard with the original Surface. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and not like this, what you're talking about, but basically it was a keyboard that was only touch, no mechanical response. And what people realized was that without that mechanical response, they weren't actually hitting the keys as they wanted to.
I think they got the Yoga Book. They have like a haptic feedback on it when you hit it, so it's something. But
even still, this idea of we're going to replace mechanical with touch is, I think, 100% wrong. They can coexist, but there was this whole movement in the end of our college careers where it was just like sites like Gizmodo and just a whole bunch of sites just like, here's a bunch of people using switches. Because with touch, coming like into the fold and all these conversations around it, people were really realizing like how nice physical response is, like actual physical response.
Right.
And I do feel like that's also part of why BlackBerry's fucking thing, Thunder whatever, floundered, because it's just like, it was just a gimmick. I mean, it might be a gimmick that could eventually be made better, evolved, so that it is a proper feeling.
The BlackBerry Storm.
It just wasn't impressive. It was just kind of like, I remember somebody at school had one, and I got to fiddle with it for a bit, and it was just like, this is it? This is what they were talking about? Like,
so the iPhone 7, they replaced like the home button on it. It's actually not a mechanical button anymore. It's exactly that. It's that haptic feedback, and it's fucking weird.
I heard that. Yeah,
it is weird. So it's.
But sure. That's how. Why is that necessary? Like, what? Why?
To keep it from breaking? Maybe, I don't know.
Come on. How often does that really happen? Like, it's one of those things
where
where
new phones every 2 years, anyways. So.
I do think that is starting to change, where people are going to start going on 3 and 4 year phones because
I'm seriously thinking about it. Like with this success, like if I can keep it for a third year, I might do it.
I think it's happening because of the new contracting too, where it's just like the phones are too expensive to just be these 2-year contract subsidized prices.
I think I'm gonna need 2 years before I can actually get everything to play right together. It's just I feel like things are not evolving or iterating, I should say, at the same time. Like between the iPhone 7 and the new MacBook Pro, like it's just like.
Oh, you mean there's too many disconnects between them?
Yeah, it's like, why the fuck isn't there USB-C on the iPhone 7?
We can just go back to all the conversations we had about how much I hate iTunes, even trying to get this fucking thing to interface with my desktop. Like, it's just, yeah, like it not only does iteration happen more than evolution, and these companies do try to confuse us between the two of them, but more often than not it is iteration. Iteration is basically innovation. I mean,
that's what they're trying to pull off, but really, like, innovation was the first iPhone, the first iPod. Like that was innovative.
No, those were evolutions.
You think so? Well, I mean, based off, like you said, it came from the Walkman, but I mean,
definably, evolution would be a crucial change to the way in which things work. So we went from these flip phones with physical devices, with physical interfaces that had a barely had any processing and graphics power, to an actual device that, yes, connected to the internet, the actual internet, had a completely new way to interface with touch, because you had Palm, which was touch, but really most of that was through the stylus, whereas they changed how accurate you could interface with a touch device. And again, it was so much innovation that it became evolution. Iteration and innovation can lead to evolution, but it just has to be like the iPhone was basically a momentous event. Yes. Where people were literally stopping others and saying, "Is that an iPhone?" Because they could not believe that this thing existed.
There was no hard buttons. It was all touch, all software. Which was, and the hardware looked great too. Well, maybe not the first
generation. And it had powerful internals, and that was important too, because there had never been such a small device so powerful as the iPhone. I'm sure there was there were attempts at this, but it the way it brought all of these things together, the form factor, everything, that was evolution. And since then, they have iterated on that, or slightly innovated. Say the camera, the dual camera. That's not an evolution. Yeah. That's an innovation.
To kind of work off that, even though we're saying these are iterations, that's not. I don't want to make it seem like we're taking away from some of the engineering feats that have gone on in these devices and computers. Like the thinness of your displays.
What we want to take away from is the advertising.
Right. So like these devices, they're just innovations, or not just iterations, but a lot goes into it, like the battery life, cameras, like you just mentioned. That takes a lot of time and money and knowledge to be able to do that. But I think maybe all of this, what we're seeing, between these two events, is hopefully we're kind of on the verge of some sort of evolution to come out of this.
What this actually pushes me towards when I see this is we're actually stagnating a lot more personally. I'd like to kind of hold that same idea that you kind of want to push towards, but for me, I'm just the more you see iteration, the more there is an opportunity for an outside company, outside of Google, outside of Apple, outside of Microsoft, to finally do that impressive thing. And again, that fucking over-the-air touch thing may have done it, but the thing is, it didn't, because it finally got out to us, and people realized it's just it's not that great. Yeah. And we have to give these things a shot. But when at face value, these two things, these are simply slight improvements
Mm-hmm.
to what we already have.
Yeah.
Mark, I'm disappointed in humanity. Let's fucking end this show.
I mean, disappointed in humanity. Like, do not turn on CNN at all. You will kill yourself.
I mean, this is impressive all the same, but like the same thing goes for the evolution of displays. Right now, we are in a period of iterating on the most recent evolution, which was flat screen HD, and
we're just getting sharper images, faster frame rates, deeper colors. It's all necessary. Like, that has to happen for us to innovate and evolve into something else.
Exactly. These things take time. I recall reading an article about fusion technology and how like they have this idea of making fusion technology better and possibly self-sustaining. However, they literally said in the article, they're just like, we are literally like decades off from having the technology to make this happen. So like the ideas are out there, but like the scientists and engineers who are literally making this shit even recognize that it's just like, wow, cool idea, but like we actually literally have to just let things happen before we can even attempt to do this stuff. And that's amazing too, in and of itself, that like we can recognize that like we have to allow ourselves to give technology time to evolve.
Right.
Very cool. But yeah, when I see these, I'm impressed by the advertising. But
the more I watch this, the more I'm like, okay, what is actually necessary in this trailer? Like, all the little components going together.
Oh yeah.
Like,
all that stuff. Yeah,
like,
it's just like it's just flair. It's Mac flair. Yeah. But that's exactly what catches people, because you don't sit in front of these advertisements for hours at a time,
right,
or even hundreds of views at a time, and realize that it's just like, oh, this is actually a lot of flair,
right?
And
it's like you see like those internal components like moving together, and like it's like, wow, you guys hired a really nice animator. But it's like when you see that, you're like, what is this? Whereas if it just cuts right to the computer, you're like, oh, Microsoft's got a new computer, whatever.
But when like at the end of the day, when you fucking like get down to it, that is what sold Apple. And being able to hold on to your pen and possibly turn your image, there is something there, but I still say there is more iteration there than innovation. Or
I mean, right now I've got two devices. Like, I've got the trackpad and my mouse. Like, I've got and keyboard. It's like I've got three things already I need to interface with. Like, to have another fucking knob to do the same thing. Like, come on, it's
exactly.
We need another arm to spread out of us eventually.
Basically, like there are these special humans who do come along every now and then with nuclear power. As awful as that started off with, it was an important evolution in technology for humans. The car, which might still turn out to be a horrible idea that we over-adopted, the computer, the smartphone, like these special people do come along and make these things and change the way we go about our lives. But right now, we're in just this period, in my mind, of just iteration, and that's fine, because it is important, as we said. But really, this has been another episode of Great Scott Marcus. Mark,
let's
play some Warframe.
That was good.
It was. I feel like these graphics are really helping us in our discussion.
Absolutely.
It was a great decision. I need to make a splash screen. All right. We'll catch you next time, guys. If you liked what we did here, do the thing.
Until next time, do good things.